All right, this video will walk you through a few of the specific analyses and graphs that you're going to produce in lab number 1. So you're going to use your stats toolbox, which is likely a yellow color, and I keep it in the front of my notebook, but you can keep it wherever you like. It begins with the quiz guide for the stats vocabulary, the thing you should be doing flashcards on. And then it comes to this stuff, which is the SPSS pages that I've created for you. Some of the pages, some of the dialog boxes you'll see here will be a little bit different from what you see on the screen with SPSS. But for the most part, you can ignore any differences. If they've added some things on the screen that you don't have in the notebook here, we're not going to use them. Okay, so just to give you a quick overview, we're going to start off with frequency distributions. For quantitative and qualitative data, we're going to do two kinds of graphs. And then for qualitative data, we're going to do two kinds of graphs. And then we're going to graph some error bars. And then on this last page, we'll do some frequency tables and descriptive statistics and comparing means. And that's it. The next page is correlation regression, and we'll save that adventure for later. Okay, so I've got this set up here where you can pay attention to what I'm doing and hopefully watch me do things and then run through it on your own if you like. The lab will have you do all these different kinds of analyses so you get the practice there. I think many of you could figure this out on your own just looking at these pages, but I'm going to work through each of these problems with you just in case you need that. Okay, so the first thing to do is we got to open a data set. And it's this data set that I call bogus Winthrop data. And as the name implies, I just made up some data and said it was about Winthrop. So you're going to go get that from wherever I'm currently keeping the data set. Right now, it's at my faculty website, but that could change. So the faculty website is... Okay, so here's my faculty website, and you can find the data sets here, and Dancing Penguins from Mary Poppins, hope you appreciate that. And then you can see where it says bogus Winthrop data. I'm just going to click on that, and if everything goes well, it should just open in SPSS, and then you are off and running. So you're going to have here some different variables and different values for those variables. And we are going to run some analyses on these. All right, I scrunched up things so you could see it a little bit better. But these are the variables. We're in data view. If you go to variable view, it gives you the full labels for what these variables are. So like reside is residence, program is intervention, GPA is college GPA, etc. And then you can go over here to the values and see what the numbers for these variables mean. Okay, I'm going to work through this first page here where we're doing frequency distributions and we're doing graphs of frequency distributions with quantitative data. I'm going to do two kinds of graphs, a histogram and a line graph. All right, so I'm going to come up here to graphs. I'm going to come down to legacy dialog, and I'm going to scoot on down here to histogram. For histogram, I'm going to move over college GPA to my variable. I'm going to ask it to display the normal curve, and then I'm going to hit OK. And you will see here that I get a nice little graph that is showing me the distribution of college GPA using a histogram. And it overlays the normal curve here so I can kind of eyeball if there's any deviations from the normal curve. All right, so that was one kind of graph. I'm still on that first page. Instead of a histogram, I can instead do a line graph. So just ignore this for now and leave it on summaries of groups of cases. And I'm going to move GPA here onto the, whoops, I messed that up. Scratch that. So here on the line graph, I need to change this to summary. So what I'm going to do is the line graph. So that's the same thing. I'm going to do summary of groups of cases. I'm going to take the variable GPA and I'm going to move it to the category axis. And it's going to, when I hit OK, it's going to give me a line graph that is basically the same thing as showing me the same information as the histogram. However, it doesn't produce the same class intervals here. So with the small data set, it looks like somebody's having a heart attack or something. So most of the time, we're going to use the histogram when we have quantitative data. But in theory, we could do a line graph as well. They're really basically the same thing. Okay, so that was this page. I'm going to go to the next page where I now have frequency distributions with qualitative data. And so now I'm going to go to my data set and I'm going to still go graphs, legacy, and the first one I'm going to do is bar. And I'm going to leave it on summaries for groups of cases. And now what I'm going to do is take the gender, which is a qualitative variable. I'm going to put it on my category axis. And I'm going to hit OK. And it will give me this fine looking graph where I have, a little bigger for you here, where I have gender and the count, the frequency. So it's just showing me the distribution of genders that I have. This is 8 males, 12 females. That's everybody in the data set. So that was the bar graph. If you're looking at your SPSS guide, we can also do a pie chart. So I'm going to come back here and go to graphs, legacy, pie, leave it on groups of cases. Now I'm going to define the slices for gender. So same information, but now in the very soothing blue and green pie graph format. All right, so that was for the qualitative data. Now moving on, there's these other things we can do that are called error bars. And I'm just going to stop here a second and make sure you understand what these things are doing. So an error bar will give you two key pieces of information. It'll take the mean, so that's the mean GPA, and then it'll show me one standard deviation above and one standard deviation below, if that's what I ask for. In this way where it lets me compare, like here's like the distribution of females versus the distribution of males. So this is just helpful to see what's going on with the data set because it represents both the central tendency and the standard deviation, so a measure of variability. Okay, so how do we do that? So now I'm going to go up to graphs, still legacy, go to error bar. And I'm going to click on summaries for, in this case, I need to click on summaries of separate variables. So this interface can be a little bit confusing, but my rule of thumb is just try it. And if it doesn't give you what you want, come back to this point and try the other one. But in this case, to start with, I'm just going to graph GPA. I don't want to group it into males and females yet. That's the second step. So that's why I'm selecting separate variables. I'm just graphing GPA by itself. Okay, so I'm going to move GPA over here, say I want an error bar on it. And then there's two things you want to change. You want to change the bars representing the standard deviation, and we'll set the multiplier to just 1. So we'll get the mean plus or minus 1 standard deviation. Okay, run that. So there I go. I got I got the mean of GPA overall, 2.7-ish something, plus or minus 1 standard deviation. That's what that graph is showing. Okay, if I go back to my SPSS guide, now the next thing I want to do is I want to do it for separate cases where I break out GPA into males and females. Okay, so how do I do that? I go analyze, graphs, legacy, error bar. Now I'm going to click on groups of cases, define, and I'm going to say the variable I'm graphing is GPA, but the category axis I want to use for that the variable of gender. So I move that over there, and I'm just going to write here the category axis. You should think about as being your X variable, right? So if I have a graph I'm doing, X is my category axis where I'm going to divide up into male and female, and then GPA, the thing that I'm actually getting a value on, is on my y-axis. Okay, so remember I need to change the bars to represent standard deviation with a multiplier of 1. And I hit OK. And now you'll see that I get, oops, I did it wrong. I did it for on campus and off campus. So that's that's one way of doing it. Let me go back and do the correct one. So I did the error bars. That was right, but I happened to grab the wrong thing here. I grabbed residence. Let me go back and grab the right one. That's gender. Check that. Standard deviation and 1. That's correct. Okay, let's try that again. All right, now I have the graph where I have an error bar where it's for males and females, and then in both cases the mean is in the middle. That's that dot, and then you got 1 standard deviation above and 1 standard deviation below for both of those. So the short story, if you look at this, you can see that females have a slightly higher mean and less variability than males. All right. Okay, so those were the error bars on this page. I did it first for just a single variable, and then when I grouped it with cases. And now I'm on to the last page here that we're going to do in the first 2 labs. Excuse me. Okay, so I need to do a frequency table and some optional statistics. So one thing you want to note here in your manual is that if you want to get the median, the mean, and the mode, you need to do it with the frequency table. You would think you'd be able to get it with descriptives, but it turns out to get the mean, the median, or the mode, the measures of central tendency, you have to use the frequency tables. So make sure you remember that's where you need to go. All right, so let's do that quick. I'm going to go back to SPSS, and now I'm going to go to, all right, I'm going to go up to Analyze, Descriptive, Frequencies, and I think I selected residence and number of Winthrop friends. Okay, and then I can request these additional statistics. That's where I'm going to request the mean, median, and the mode, and the standard deviation. I hit continue, and it's going to display the frequency tables. I hit OK, and here we go. So to start with, I've got the mean, median, and the mode for those 2 variables that I selected. And then I come down here and I got my frequency tables for both residents and number of Winthrop friends. Easy peasy, right? All right, next here, I'm going to get my descriptive statistics. So I'm going to go, let's see, in descriptive statistics, looking at college GPA and number of Winthrop friends that looks like I have selected. So I'm going to go up to Analyze, Descriptives, Descriptives. And I'm going to select I'm going to select college GPA and number of Winthrop friends. And we're going to hit OK. And there we go. We got our table. Remember, it's organized differently than in the statistics above. Here it goes down the page, college GPA, number of Winthrop friends, etc. All right, and then last we get this compare means statistic, which is just comparing the means of two groups. So what I have here, you can see in the manual, is GPA and gender. So I'm going to go up to Analyze, down to Compare Means, and then Means. And then we're going to make college GPA our dependent variable, gender our independent variable. Hit OK. And here we go. This first table, this case processing thing, whoops, you can pretty much ignore that. Here we have our college GPA, and it breaks into males and females so you can compare those two. All right, that's pretty much it. We've just run through we just ran through the first few pages of this manual, looking at the frequency, quantitative, qualitative, the error bars, and then this last page where we did frequency tables, descriptives, and compare means. So that is that. Next thing I'll do is actually walk you through the first lab.